Hey everyone, welcome back on this Monday morning to another Senior Style Guide Real Talk podcast. Today, I am your host, Sean Brown, and I'm so excited to have none other than the incredible Meredith Gradle from Iris Works. Meredith is based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. She started Iris about 5 years ago, and if you guys are not familiar with Iris, you guys are just making your life a little bit harder. Iris is kind of that all-inclusive, comprehensive CRM or client customer relations management software that Meredith started, and honestly, it saved my life being super busy, and then I know it's saved a ton of other photographers' lives. So we're super stoked to have Meredith on here to kind of give her story and, just talk about her life and her experiences with Iris and how it's helped her. And then also, dive into a little bit of the nitty gritty of what it's like to be a mom and business owner and all that stuff. So welcome to Real Talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
It'll be fun. So for those who are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast who might not know who you are, give us that short rundown about who Meredith Gradle is, what do you do, all of that jazz.
Okay. So I am a mom, like you said. So I have two little ones, a 7 and 5-year-old, who keep me plenty busy as it is. So I've got those two, been married for, let me make sure I get it right. It'll be 12 years this fall. Usually I feel like it should be the guy who doesn't remember that, but it'll be 12 years this fall. That's correct. And former life, many years ago when I got out of school, I worked for a hospital system actually here in Indy. And I was not at all in healthcare, like direct patient care, I guess. But what I was doing was all administration work. So I did recruiting, I did compensation, and then my last role that I had there was process improvements. So I was, working with the technology department that we had to try to figure out how can we do things more efficiently. But during that time, I picked up a camera, took some classes, and learned, photography. So I was a self-taught photographer. I did mostly portraits, families, newborns, which I don't miss. They're very time consuming and hard work. And so I picked that up, and I was just doing that kind of part-time while I was still working at the hospital. After my daughter was born, I said, okay, I don't want to work at this hospital anymore. This is not my passion. And I took photography full time. So that was back in 2012, kind of went all in on the business there. And then a couple years later, my son was born. And I realized that, okay, I love working, but I don't like working weekends and evenings. And that was kind of, at that point, when you have a family, my husband was working Monday through Friday, daytime hours, and I was working evenings and weekends, second shooting weddings or family sessions. And we just kind of said, hey, this isn't really going to work now that we're starting, growing our family and things like that. So I started to kind of scale back a little bit, but I realized I kind of had this crazy client situation that made me realize that I really wasn't doing a good job of managing my business as it was. And so that sparked the whole idea of, all right, well, how can I streamline this? How can I make myself more efficient so that I have more family time and can still, do what I really enjoy doing? So I could be a mom, but also still continue working in some capacity. And that kind of snowballed. And then Iris was created about a year after the initial idea started.
Super cool. Yeah. And then tell us what Iris is. Just, I'm a user. I don't know if everybody knows exactly what even a client relation management software is or a CRM. So kind of what is Iris? What does it do? Kind of what was it built for?
Yeah. So Iris was really built to help photographers manage everything outside of taking the photos, editing, and, sharing images, right? So that's kind of what, especially when new people get into photography, they don't necessarily realize how much work is involved on the client side, the contracting, the invoicing, and managing all of those components while still spending as much time as possible behind the camera or, acquiring new clients and things like that. So Iris is really created to help you streamline your business, keep those clients organized, make sure that you're covering all of your bases when it comes to contracts and make sure you're getting paid and all of that stuff. So Iris is really a super simple CRM, which is the common term. Sometimes you'll hear it called studio management system as well. So it's meant to manage all of those components outside of actually taking the images. So think of things like all of those emails that you're sending to your clients with questionnaires, contracts, invoicing, online booking, all wrapped into one simple system. And the biggest thing that we focused on, especially when we launched and we continue to do, is just keeping things super simple. Artists, photographers, we're creatives, and a lot of times technology can be super overwhelming and scary. And so we tried and continue to focus on keeping everything easy, straightforward, not complicated, but still providing the value that photographers need.
Exactly. So it's really just stuff that every photographer is doing over and over for each client, which you guys call workflows.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of, a big goal is to try to take as much work off of your plate as possible, especially with those repeat tasks. So you're sending the same questionnaire, the same kind of messaging to your clients over and over again. And so exactly what we have is called a workflow. And you're able to say, every time I book a senior, here's the things that need to happen. And then Iris can actually handle it for you.
I love it. Yeah. And it's, like I said, it saved my life. And I love how it's customizable too, where you can literally input. It's everything from client names, if you need to change up the message, say they asked a specific question upon inquiry, all that stuff, which is super helpful. And it's like, especially where I'm gone so much or on the road, and it's like a time saver. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it.
So, okay, let's dive into how you got started with photography. You just, one day you're like, let's go to the Best Buy and pick up whatever camera has the best looking box or whatever. How did that kind of come about?
So it was funny. This was way, I don't even know if we were married yet. My husband, Drew, he is a cyclist. So he would do these races where he's, professional. I don't know if that's right term, but so he'd be doing these cycling races, and we thought, oh, it'd be cool if we got some pictures of him while he's doing these races. And so we just went to probably like a Best Buy or some similar store, and we're like, okay, we'll just get a digital camera with a cool, awesome lens and all this stuff. So we bought one, right?
20 times optical zoom or digital zoom.
Right. And so I thought, oh, this is so cool. So the first thing I did, I think I probably left it in the box for a couple of months, right? Like we had it, I maybe took it out a couple of times, but never did anything with it. And then I realized like, okay, I should probably figure out how to use this. And my uncle is a photographer. And at the time he was teaching just like intro, to digital photography classes at, kind of this career center. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just take his class. If he told this story, he would make so much fun of me because I was here, I had no idea what I was doing with the camera. And he's, knowing me, he's like, come on, you should be able to figure this out. But anyway, I took his class, and then I realized like, oh, you can manipulate things, you can control things. It's not just a camera that's giving you, what you're looking for. You actually can control it and manipulate what you're trying to achieve. And so after that, I kind of started taking a lot more classes. So I did a couple Photoshop classes and learned how to kind of do the basics there. And then it just kind of over time kind of started, very similar to probably a lot of people who, they're like, oh, friends, I could take some pictures for you. Or what I did a lot of times was just make my friends be kind of like a model for me. I'm like, okay, you have kids, let's take some pictures. Let me try this out. Yeah. And so it started that way. And then after time kind of started to realize, okay, I can perfect this. I can get better at this. Upgraded my gear eventually, and switched from, I think my first camera was at the time a Sony, which was at that point was not where it is today, obviously. Switched to Nikon because my uncle shot Nikon, and he's like, you can just borrow all of my, my lenses and all of my.
That's super nice.
Yeah. So it worked out really well. And so that kind of started everything. And then, like many people at the time, Facebook was my main avenue for marketing myself. And it just kind of took off, and it was so fun. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that your story is so like, a ton of other photographers where it's like you pick up a camera for one reason and all of a sudden it turns into, okay, now I need to know how to run a business. So I need to know how to do taxes and I know how to do marketing and all that stuff. So
Right.
what was like the biggest struggle that you faced when you were like initially getting started, kind of that initial hurdle that you think you kind of experienced?
I think the initial hurdle was probably two things come to mind. One was just making sure that I got my name out there. So, it started out thinking, well, I can just tell all my friends and that will turn this into a business, right? And that works a little bit, I think, in the beginning, but then you realize, okay, you actually really have to market yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show off your work. You have to put yourself out there. And that was a foreign thing for me. I mean, at the time, social media was not really it wasn't even close to what it is today, right? Where people are sharing constantly and you're always putting yourself out there. At the time, it was really none of that. You would maybe share a couple pictures on Facebook. Instagram didn't even exist. I'm probably showing, I guess, my age a little bit here, but Facebook was like it. So, and so I quickly realized, like, okay, you have to figure out how to position yourself as a photographer, as a professional. And I think the big hurdle there was shifting from, only friends and kind of, charging less because they're friends or family, and shifting to the true professional where, you're getting clients, true inquiries, people who you don't know personally, who are then seeking out your services. And I think that was truly when I realized, like, the first couple people who come in that you don't know, that's when you realize, like, okay, these efforts, putting myself out there on Facebook has actually worked well for me. So, and so I think that was probably the biggest hurdle that I experienced personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it came to, kind of wanting to create Iris, was that solely out of personal necessity? Was that out of something else?
So it started out of personal necessity. So I had this client who was a repeat client of mine, and I adored them. Photographed them a couple of times, and they ended up using me, I think maybe 3 times, and then hired me for a newborn session. I kind of dropped the ball in terms of communicating expectations with that client, and they got upset, rightfully so. The images were, they met expectations when it came to the actual images, but in terms of delivery, communication after the fact, I really disappointed them. And that was the moment that I realized I'm not running this the way I should be.
Yeah.
And for me personally, disappointing people is like the worst thing in the entire world. I hate disappointing people. What I loved about photography was making people happy and, giving them something that they've truly enjoyed and would treasure. Yeah. And so when someone got upset with me about, my lack of communication, essentially, I realized, like, okay, Meredith, you are not organized. You are not, making sure your clients are being treated properly, and you're doing all of the things you're not checking off all the boxes, essentially.
Totally.
So that was the initial reason I thought, okay, I got to get a system. And I went back to, like, my mindset when I was working in the hospital. It was like, we had a system for everything. That was the goal. So, so that was when I started exploring options. And what I quickly realized was I hated all of the existing options in the marketplace. They were too confusing. They were more than what I needed. Or they were just super expensive in my mind at the time, paying $50 a month for a system that was really geared towards, the wedding photographers and not necessarily the portrait world. I just thought, well, I don't need all of that. Here's kind of what I need. And that really then snowballed into creating Iris. And then, talking to a lot of my counterparts in the industry, I realized quickly, okay, I'm not the only one who's seeking something or would benefit from something like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I know you mentioned too, having kids, and now all of a sudden you're thrusting 2 little ones into the mix, and now your time seems to diminish by tenfold.
Right.
So how did you kind of see the impacts of, having those systems in place with also having a family, trying to run a business, all that stuff that every day people have to deal with? And, maybe they're not even a business owner, but they're just stressed on time anyways. And now they're trying to also run a business with all that going on. How do you see kind of the workflows and having those systems in place as really being beneficial to those people or yourself?
Yeah, I think what was pretty awesome is as soon as we put Iris out there, the big comment that we would always get is like, wow, this is like having an assistant for my business. Or like, I don't have to hire an assistant now. I feel like I'm getting my life back and getting time back because Iris can actually be doing things for you while you're out playing with your kids, So, and for me personally, I think I thrive on being busy. I love to work. I think it just gives me, it's my passion, right? So I love working. I love my kids too. Don't get me wrong. They're my passion as well. But for me, I love that now my kids know, like, mommy works, mommy owns a business, mommy, helps other photographers. And so I talk to them a lot about that. And they just understand, like, okay, mom might be a little bit busy. I still carve out the time for them. I learn how to shut things off and things like that. But I think as business owners, we have to kind of find what works for us. Everybody's situation is different. But my hope is that Iris continues to offer those kind of benefits to not just moms, but busy photographers, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, like I said, everybody kind of has their own story about, what's going on in their life. They travel a lot. A lot of photographers are working more than just photography, right? They're working another job or trying to branch out into something else. And so we want to make sure that we're giving the value back to people and that we're basically, we like to say we're giving you your life back. You're able to run a business and enjoy what you love doing, but you're still able to, do other things as well, whatever they may be.
You mentioned that you love to work. I'm the exact same way. Like it's bad at times. It's hard to shut off. So, why do you think that, people love being busy? Because I think that there are people that just genuinely love to stay busy.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I know that I think part of why I love to stay busy is, I love the work that I'm doing. So I think, people who just want to be busy, that might not be sustainable, right? So I think, for me, it was really important to find something that I was super passionate about and interested in. And now I actually like coming to work. If I look back on my life when I was at the hospital, I hated it. I liked the people, which is, I think, a big component of your work life, but I didn't enjoy the work itself. And, I look back, the Time Hop app, I don't know if you have the Time Hop app, but when you
I've seen it. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever installed it or whatever you need to do.
It just reminds you of okay, 10 years ago today, here's what you shared on social media, which is kind of scary. But, and there'll be things where I'm saying, oh my gosh, I hate my job. Another awful day at the hospital, things like that. And I think, gosh, I'm so glad I'm not in that position anymore. So one part of it, I think, is, when you find something that you truly love, being busy isn't a bad thing. And I also think, I truly love helping people and making people happy. So when I hear, that Iris is actually helping photographers all over the world now, get some part of their life back or make their business better or help them grow their business, it's just it's just very gratifying, I guess. And I thrive on that. So if I'm extra busy because, we're trying to make Iris better, there's tons of reasons behind why we're doing it that continue to push me forward.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, and I think personally, kind of my take on why people love to be busy is that it has kind of a sense of worth where all of a sudden you feel like you're actually doing something that's, worthwhile for whether that be yourself or somebody else. And I think that kind of having that notion of just being busy, like you said, just to be busy, where it's like, if you need, you don't need to answer 20 emails that you could all automate. just
Right.
so that you can stay busy.
Right.
You have those workflows in place or those systems in place to really allow you to take back your time to do exactly what you said, which is to do what you love.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, some people thrive just on I'm so busy, but you can be
Well, it's
busy.
almost like a badge of honor that they wear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like you can be busy without killing yourself at the same time, right? So you can still have, those 20 emails, but you can actually put stuff in place where it's like, yeah, those 20 emails are getting handled while I am, going on a date, or I am, spending the day at the pool or whatever, because you can be smart about it, right? So I think that's the important thing when people think they want to say, I'm so busy, I have so much work to do. It's like, well, that doesn't mean that you have to be killing yourself in the process,
Yeah.
right? You can still thrive in life without having to be, and still be busy, right? And still have that workflow or that workload, I guess, that supports that growing business.
Yeah. Well, I think there's an important point to differentiate too, which is that being busy with kind of minute tasks is not a good thing to do. Being busy with larger picture items is a really good thing to do. There's always that you always want to be working towards kind of that big picture goal.
Right.
But it's those small tasks that slow you down from reaching that big picture goal.
Yeah, that's so true. And people that tend to lose sight then of the big picture goal when they're so focused on all of those kind of minuscule tasks.
Yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned also turning off for kids and stuff like that. Did you struggle with doing that initially?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think that's taken a solid couple years to get to that point, and I'm not totally great at it. So if you asked Drew, he'd be like, you're always on your phone. And so I do try, I am the one typically who, puts my daughter on the bus, and I get my son off to school, and then I pick them up at the end of the day. My husband's job doesn't offer as much flexibility in terms of when he can be where. And so then, I do dinner, spend time with the kids before bed, put them to bed. And then, sometimes I got to turn work back on. But I try not to, I try to be super efficient when I'm here. I have a great team around me now that, in the beginning, it was just me for a long time.
Yeah.
And that was really hard because I had, my son was, oh gosh, not even 2 years old when I launched Iris, I guess. It's hard to think back that far. I know that sounds so silly. He's only 5.
I was about to say, it's like, it's only a few years ago, right?
Yeah, right. Time when you have kids, like your brain just doesn't work the same way anymore. But so, he was little. My daughter was young. They weren't in school all the time. And so I was working constantly. I've been called a workaholic more times than I'd probably like to say, but again, I loved it, and it was exciting, and people were responding to what we had. And so I think, again, I thrive off of that. And so over time I've learned, okay, it's okay to delegate. I'm terrible at that, but now that I have a team, everybody kind of knows, okay, this is my project. This is my area of the business that I own. And we've got great people around us. So, I trust them, and they can run with projects, manage them, and do a great job. And then that gives me a little bit more flexibility in terms of, getting out the door on time to pick up the kids and things like that, and being able to shut off slightly. Yeah.
How did you learn to shut off? Was it having people that you were hiring and kind of delegating with, or what was that kind of moment where you're like, this is what I need to do to shut off?
Yeah. So shut off is probably a really strong term, because I don't know that I ever actually can shut off.
Let's step away, because I'm the exact same way.
Away.
I can't shut off. I'm always, it's always going. So let's just say constant. Step away.
Yeah. So I think it probably wasn't even really until this last year that I felt okay to do it. And I think part of it is when you have a sense of ownership over something, you want to make sure that no ball gets dropped and everything is running smoothly. And I think for me, the hard part was doing Iris in the beginning by myself, essentially. I did everything, and so I had to make sure that none of the balls, hit the ground. Yeah. And over time, I think my team has been pretty good about being like, go, like you have a family vacation, go, we got it taken care of. And they don't contact me unless they absolutely have to during that time. So I think having the support there in place has been super helpful. And so I am able to kind of step back at times. And then, you just have to trust people. And so, finally kind of was able to say, all right, you've got this team in place. You hired these people for a reason. They're dedicated. Totally. And so trust them that when you are away, they're taking care of stuff and they do a wonderful job. So I've been very lucky in that area.
When I think a lot of photographers listening, it comes down to exactly what you said. You want to have ownership of what you're putting out. You don't want to drop a ball. You want to make sure that everything is exactly how you want it to be. So how do you learn to find that trust with people that they're going to do a job that's, up to your standards?
So I think it's a big internal struggle because you do have to put 100% trust in someone else, or be comfortable in coaching people to say, okay, hey, this is great. Let's think about, doing things a little differently next time, or did you think about how we could maybe improve upon something? So I think part of it is, you have to force yourself out of that comfort zone initially. And a lot of times people will say, well, I could just do it. I could just do it myself. I could just do it. And for a long time, that's what I would say. Well, I can just do it. I can do it myself. I could be faster. I could do it better. But as your business grows, you have to focus, kind of like what you're saying, you have to focus on that big picture and make sure that you're trying to drive your business forward. And so surrounding yourself with the people who support that vision and want to continue to help that business, develop and grow is super important. You just have to let go of some things and trust in other people. So it's not like an easy thing. At least it wasn't for me. And everybody's different, but delegating is a hard thing, I think.
It is. Yeah. Whether, that be editing or who's going to handle your payroll or taxes or whatever. Yeah.
I think editing is the biggest, thing that I could compare it to is it's your work, right? So handing that off to somebody else and giving up in a sense, the control in a way, right, is important. But if you are being clear about your expectations, you are outlining, okay, here's what I like, here's what I don't like when you're talking with someone about editing, having that open dialogue is crucial in any kind of working relationship. And so, people freak out about outsourcing editing, and it's like, I get it, but there's ways to do it where it can actually benefit you. And just think of the time you save on something like that even. I mean, it's huge.
Well, it was just on another Real Talk, we were talking about this, and I did the math one day, and it was, in order to outsource my editing for the entire year for like every single client, it was like I needed to book like 1 or 2 additional clients. And I was like, that is a no-brainer in my book.
Right.
Like, from a business mindset, it makes 0 sense not to be outsourcing or delegating tasks.
Right.
It makes 0 sense. And so, why do you think people struggle with kind of getting over that hurdle, or how do they get over that hurdle of trusting and wanting to make it a business decision versus an artist decision?
And I think that is the biggest struggle in general for photographers and artists. Our brains they work that way, right? We focus on the art. It's very hard to shift and focus on the business side as well. And so, I think it's one of those things you have to step out of your comfort zone. And I think as a business owner, if you're not willing to do that from time to time, you might not succeed, right? You're gonna prevent yourself from moving forward if you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone. And so again, I think something like that, where you're outsourcing your editing or your books, your emails and things like that, you have to take the risk. There's a risk in being an entrepreneur. And I think that is the key word, actually, now that I said this out loud. Photographers don't see themselves always as entrepreneurs, and you are a business owner. You started your own business, and you got to sometimes shift into that mindset where you're willing to take a risk. You're willing to trust in others. You're willing to do things that will potentially grow your business. And, things like editing or outsourcing your books and using a system for things frees up your time to focus on the big picture items and growing your business. And, how do I go from $50,000 to $100,000 next year? And, how do you truly live off of this dream that you've created for yourself? So, it's a hurdle I think for everybody, not just creatives probably, but especially with creatives.
Yeah. What's a risk that you've personally taken in your business or life even?
I think the biggest risk was starting Iris. I mean, it was, people ask, I think some people expect like this. I had a dream to have my own business. I have a background in software. I think they expect that story. I kind of sometimes look back and think, like, what the hell was I thinking? At times, right? Because I'm not a developer. I never had this dream of I'm going to own a software company, or even I'm going to own a business with employees and, and put myself out there. It was not anything like that. And so I think that's hands down the biggest risk I think I've ever taken. And then, we take risks all the time here, in terms of, prioritizing things. We get so much feedback from our users, from potential customers of, hey, this would be awesome. And we have to take all of those things into account. And then the risk is, okay, we hear this. We also have this big vision of where we want to go as a company, and what, we have ideas of things that we think will make Iris even better and more intuitive. And so we kind of have to balance all of that. And I think there's a risk all the time in terms of, if we go with what a user suggested and put off something else, there's a risk involved there, and then vice versa. But the biggest risk was hands down deciding like, yeah, I'm going to start a software company. And I will say, I've learned more than I ever thought I was capable of in this process. So I think, being open to just to learning and to feedback from others and taking people's advice is something I think entrepreneurs have to focus on and be open to, and also knowing when not to take advice, because you get a lot of feedback from people, and it's not always the right input or advice. So yeah.
Well, and I think that you kind of hit it right on the head, where you say that you learned more than you ever thought you were capable of learning.
Yeah.
And I think that only comes from putting yourself in an uncomfortable position.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that only comes by taking risks, because if you go the safe route, everything's super comfortable. Everything is, it's that nice, perfect temperature hot tub that you like to get in. You're not going to get burnt, but you also know that you're not going to learn to adjust to it over time. And it just kind of becomes that place where you're stuck in the middle, because you're not really going backwards, but you're also not really going forwards. If that happens.
Yeah. There's no growth involved, right? So if you're not willing to take some sort of risk, or try something new, or be open to things, you'll never be able to grow the way that you're truly capable of. And I think, I've surprised myself, and I think a lot of people do, when they actually kind of open up that door and say, all right, I'm going to be open to this. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to take a risk. And you really do get the opportunity to kind of learn about yourself, and then challenge yourself in ways that you probably didn't think you could. So, yeah.
What's most important to you about having your own business?
The bottom line is I love making other people happy. And so with Iris, that's kind of always my goal. And that's why Iris is important to me. We're truly helping other people. Being a business owner, I think, again, I never set out to say like, I'm going to be the owner of a company. But, I love, there is some flexibility that comes along with it. Not a lot at this point, but there is some. And I think, most importantly, it's helping other people and seeing their businesses succeed because of what we're doing here. And so that, again, it's very gratifying. And it kind of goes back to why I love photography so much, is I loved being able to provide something to someone that, made them happy. I know it sounds kind of elementary, but that's what's important here. And that's why I think I love it as much as I do. Yeah.
Looking outside of photography, business stuff, what are you like passionate or obsessed with right now?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I wasn't expecting a question like that. I mean, family is probably my biggest passion outside of, out of business, and definitely comes before business. I have 3 sisters, all of which I'm super close with, and so I think family, and just I think as you get older, you continue to realize the importance of family, and how special life is in general. You get older, and your parents get older, and their friends are getting older, and you see that life can throw curveballs. And so I think, I'm super passionate about, family and making sure time is well spent with family, because it's precious. Life is precious. And, unfortunately it can be taken away. So, yeah.
How do you keep those relationships strong?
So I think, you have to make the time for it. And I will say, I have gotten upset with myself, I guess, when I've realized like, oh gosh, I haven't reached out to so-and-so in a while, or I haven't seen someone in a while. And so I think you have to kind of carve out time for it and make sure that you're putting forth an effort there. And, being a business owner, it can be all consuming. And so, you have to kind of force yourself to, take a kind of step back and say, all right, let me make sure I'm focusing on other areas of my life too, not becoming that workaholic that truly doesn't do anything outside of that. So, but I'm super lucky that I grew up with a great family. I married into a great family. And so I think it's, and I want to instill that in my kids. I hope that as my kids get older, they don't, run off and never talk to us again. And we're lucky right now. They both say they're going to live with us forever. I'm not so sure I want that.
Give another 10 years or so.
Right. I know it probably won't even be that with our daughter. A couple years, just be like, all right, I'm out. But, I just, you hope that you can kind of carry forward that notion that, family really is important, and friends, and, just having that support system in place. Like without my family and my friends, Iris probably would not be where it is, because, you got to have that support system in place. And I think family and friends are super important for that.
Where do you kind of see yourself going next, whether that be personal goals, business goals?
Oh, I mean, I think a lot of, my goals right now are all around the business. We want to continue to make Iris better than it is. And, we think it's pretty good, but we also know that we have a lot of ways that we can make it even better. And really one of the premier systems for photographers and creatives. And so, a lot of the goals are centered around growing Iris and making it better. And, personally, I think I'd like to find even more balance between work and home. And, we're constantly, I think, as we continue to grow as a team, I'm able to slowly, make progress towards that goal too. So those are kind of the 2 goals, I think. And, continue to modify them as things come up. But yeah.
I love it. As we kind of wrap up, if you could give 3 lessons that you've learned kind of along the road, whether that be things that you've learned personally or things that you've learned professionally, what are 3 kind of lessons or pieces of advice that you've learned that you want to instill upon others that are listening or watching?
So I think first would be make sure you have your support system in place. Like I said, Iris wouldn't be anything if I didn't have, my family and friends around me. And so I've seen and know of people who didn't have that support system, or maybe thought they did but didn't truly have it. And it's very hard and can be very lonely as an entrepreneur. So I think you want to make sure you've got that support system and network in place. So luckily the photography community is such a tight-knit community, and so many photographers are willing to share and be open. So, find those people and make sure that you surround yourself with them. Another lesson, oh gosh, I wish I would have thought about this ahead of time so I'd have these really eloquent answers. Learn to delegate, learn that it's okay that you can't do all of it all the time. And I think especially if you are a parent, you've got to make sure that you have some sort of balance there. But delegate where you can, and know that it's okay to not be able to do it all the time and do it perfectly, because it's just that's not normal, right? It's not normal to be.
It's not.
And then I think, don't be afraid to take risks in your business. I think, if I wouldn't have taken a risk 5 years ago, I don't know if I'd be happy where I am today. I was not a great photographer, by the way. I never looked at myself and thought wow, you're talented. You're going to go somewhere. That was fine. And I did enjoy it. But I think, I don't know if I would have thrived enough to have that feeling of purpose long-term for myself personally. And so I think you want to make sure that, you're pushing yourself and you take some risks, even if you're not sure how it's going to pan out, because you never know where you might end up, I guess. So.
I love it. We're going to end. I'm going to have you ask our viewers and listeners a question. But first, where can people connect with you on social and on the web?
Yeah. So I'm on Facebook. I'm happy to connect with anybody on Facebook and Instagram. And then you can find Iris, iris-works.com. Just search Iris on Instagram or Facebook and definitely connect with us. We love to connect with lots of photographers. So yeah.
I love it. If you guys are listening to the podcast, go ahead, take a screenshot really quick, whether that be listening through iTunes or Spotify or whatever. It's just at IrisWorks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Tag at IrisWorks, at Senior Style Guide, at Sean Brown Productions. And then if you also want to tag Meredith, you can do that too. And we just want to see what your answer to this question is. But make sure that you are answering that question, because we love to hear with you and just get the opportunity to connect with you all. So what is that one question that you want to ask people that are listening or watching today that they're going to answer down in the comment section or over Instagram DM?
Okay. So just one question from me.
One question. I know, it's a tough one.
It is. There's a couple that I would ask. How about what is the biggest risk that you have taken in your business as of yet? And if you haven't taken a risk yet, do you see yourself being able to do that and actually take a risk?
Perfect. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up.
Yeah.
So
good.
Thank you so much for being on. I always enjoy, having the opportunity to connect with you. And I think that you're one of those people that you have bigger visions. And I think that you're also helping people along the way, which I think is the most important, where it's personally fulfilling, but also fulfilling for others as well, and allowing them to do what they want to do. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Awesome. Until next time, we'll see you guys later on. We'll talk.